The second night. All problems are interpersonal relationship problems. The young man was good to his word. Exactly 1 week later, he returned to the philosopher's study. Truth be told, he'd felt the urge to rush back there only 2 or 3 days after his first visit. He had turned things over in his mind very carefully, and his doubts had turned to certainty. In short, teleology, the attributing of the purpose of a given phenomenon rather than its cause, was a sophistry, and the existence of trauma was beyond question. People cannot simply forget the past, and neither can they become free from it. Today, the young man decided he would thoroughly dismantle this eccentric philosopher's theories and settle matters once and for all. Why you dislike yourself? Youth. So, after last time, I calmed myself down, focused, and thought things over. And yet, I have got to say, I still can't agree with your theories. Philosopher. Oh, what do you find questionable about them? Youth. Well, for instance, the other day I admitted that I dislike myself. No matter what I do, I can't find anything but shortcomings, and I can see no reason why I would start liking myself. But of course, I still want to. You can explain everything as having to do with goals, but what kind of goal could I have here? I mean, what kind of advantage could there be in my not liking myself? I can't imagine there would be a single thing to gain from it. Philosopher. I see, you feel that you don't have any strong points and you have got nothing but shortcomings. Whatever the facts that might be, that's how you feel. In other words, your self esteem is extremely low. So, the question here then are, why do you feel so wretched? And why do you view yourself with such low esteem? Youth. Because that's a fact. I really don't have any strong points. Philosopher. You are wrong. You notice only your shortcomings because you have resolved to not start liking yourself. In order to not like yourself, you don't see your strong points and focus only on your shortcomings. First, understand this point. Youth. I have resolved to not start liking myself? Philosopher. That's right. To you, not liking yourself is a virtue. Youth. Why? What for? Philosopher. Perhaps this is something you should think about yourself. What sort of shortcomings do you think you have? Youth. I am sure you have already noticed. First of all, there is my personality. I don't have any self confidence, and I'm always pessimistic about everything. And I guess I'm too self conscious because I worry about what other people see, and then I live with a constant distrust of other people. I can never act naturally. There's always something theatrical about what I say and do. And it is not just my personality. There is nothing to like about my face or my body either. Philosopher. When you go about listing your shortcomings like that, what kind of mood does it put you in? Youth. Wow, that's nasty. An unpleasant mood, naturally. I am sure that no one would want to get involved with a guy as warped as me. If there were anyone this wretched and bothersome in my vicinity, I would keep my distance too. Youth. Oh, philosopher. I see. Well, that settles it then. Youth. What do you mean? Philosopher. It might be hard to understand from your own example, so I will use another. I used this study for simple counseling sessions. It must have been quite a few years ago, but there was a female student who came by. She sat right where you are sitting now in the same chair. Well, her concern was her fear of blushing. She told me that she was always turning red whenever she was out in public and that she would do anything to get rid herself of this. So I asked her, well, if you can cure it, what will you want to do then? And she said that there was a man she wanted. She secretly had feelings for him but wasn't ready to divulge them. Once her fear of blushing was cured, she would confess her desire to be with him. Youth. Huh. Alright, it sounds like the typical thing a female student would seek counseling for. In order for her to confess feelings for him, first she had to cure her blushing problem. Philosopher. But is that really the whole case? I have a different opinion. Why did she get this fear of blushing? And why hadn't it gotten better? Because she needed that symptom of blushing. Youth. What are you saying exactly? She was asking you to cure it, wasn't she? Philosopher. What do you think was the scariest thing to her? The thing she wanted to avoid most of all? It was that the man would reject her, of course. The fact that her unrequited love would negate everything for her. The very existence and possibility of I. This aspect is deeply present in adolescent unrequited love. But as long as she had a fear of blushing, she can never go on thinking, I can't be with him because I have this fear of blushing. It could end without her ever working up the courage to confess her feelings to him, and she could convince herself that he would reject her anyway. And finally, she can live in the possibility that if only my fear of blushing had gotten better, I could have. Youth. Okay, so she fabricated that fear of blushing as an excuse for her own inability to confess her feelings, or maybe as a kind of insurance for what he rejected her, for when he rejected her. Philosopher. Yes, you could put it that way. Youth. Okay, this is an interesting interpretation. But if that were really the case, wouldn't it be impossible to do anything to help her? Since she simultaneously needed that fear of blushing and is suffering because of it, there would be no end to her troubles. Philosopher. Well, this is what I told her. Fear of blushing is easy to cure. She said, Really? I went on, But I will not cure it. She pressed me. Why? I explained. Look, it's thanks to your fear of blushing that you can accept your dissatisfaction with yourself and the world around you, and with a life that isn't going well. It's thanks to your fear of blushing, and it's caused by it. She asked. How could it be? I went on. If I did cure it and nothing in your situation changed at all, what would you do? You would probably come here again and say, Give me back my fear of blushing. And that would be beyond my abilities. Youth. Philosopher. Her story certainly isn't usual. Students preparing for their exams think, if I pass, life will be rosy. Company workers think, if I get transferred, everything will go well. But even when those wishes are fulfilled, in many cases, nothing about their situation changes at all. Youth. Indeed. Philosopher. When a client shows up requesting a cure from fear of blushing, the counselor must not cure the symptoms. If they do, recovery is likely to be even more difficult. This is the Adlerian psychology way of thinking about this kind of thing. Youth. So what specifically do you do then? Do you ask what they are worried about and then just leave it be? Philosopher. She didn't have confidence in herself. She was very afraid that things being what they are, he would reject her even if she did confess to him. And if that happened, she would lose even more confidence and get hurt. That's why she created the symptom of fear of blushing. What I can do is get to the person. What I can do is to get the person first to accept myself now, and then regardless of the outcome have the courage to step forward. In Adlerian psychology, this kind of approach is called encouragement. Youth. Encouragement? Yes, I'll explain systematically when it consists of once our discussion has progressed a little farther. We are not at that stage yet. Philosopher. Oh, a youth. That works for me. In the meantime, I'll keep the word encouragement in mind. So whatever happened to her? Philosopher. Apparently, she had the chance to join a group of friends and spend time with the man, and in the end, it was he who confessed his desire to be with her. Of course, she never dropped by the study again after that. I don't know what became of her fear of blushing, but she probably didn't need it any longer. Youth. Yes, she clearly didn't have any use for it anymore. Philosopher. That's right. Now, keeping the student's story in mind, let's think about your problems. You say that at present you notice only your shortcomings and it's unlikely that you will ever come to like yourself. And then you said, I am sure no one would want to get involved with a guy as warped as me, didn't you? I am sure you understand this already. Why do you dislike yourself? Why do you focus only on your shortcomings? And why have you decided to start not liking yourself? Why have you decided to not start liking yourself? It's because you are overly afraid of being disliked by other people and getting hurt in your interpersonal relationships. Youth, what do you mean by that? Philosopher, just like the young woman with the fear of blushing who was afraid of being rejected by the man, you are afraid of being negated by other people. You are afraid of being treated despairingly, being refused, and sustaining deep mental wounds. You think that instead of getting entangled in such situations, it would be better if you just did not have any relations with anyone in the first place. In other words, your goal is to not get hurt in your relationships with other people. Youth. Huh. Philosopher, now how can that goal be realized? The answer is easy. Just find your shortcomings, start disliking yourself, and become someone who doesn't enter into interpersonal relationships. That way, if you can shut yourself into your own shell, you won't have to interact with anyone, and you'll even have justification ready whenever other people snub you. That it's because of your shortcomings and that you get snubbed, and if things weren't this way, you could too be loved. Youth, haha. Well, you have really put me in my place now. Philosopher, don't be evasive. Being the way I am with all these shortcomings is for you a precious virtue. In other words, something that's to your benefit. Youth, ouch, that hurts. What a sadist. You're diabolical. Okay, yes, it's true. I am afraid. I don't want to get hurt in interpersonal relationships. I'm terrified of being snubbed for who I am. It's hard to admit it, but you are right. Philosopher, admitting is a good attitude, but don't forget, it's basically impossible to not get hurt in your relations with other people. When you enter into interpersonal relationships, it is inevitable that to a greater or lesser extent you will get hurt and you will hurt someone too. Adler says to get rid of one's problem, all one can do is live in the universe all alone, but one can't do such a thing. All problems are interpersonal relationship problems. Youth. Wait a minute. I'm supposed to just let that one slip by? To get rid of one's problem, all one can do is live in the universe all alone? What do you mean by that? If you lived all alone, wouldn't you be horribly lonely? Philosopher. Oh, but being alone isn't what makes you feel lonely. Loneliness is having other people and society and community around you and having a deep sense of being excluded from them. To feel lonely, we need other people. That is to say, it is only in social contexts that a person becomes an individual. Youth. If you were really alone, that is, if you existed completely alone in the universe, you wouldn't be an individual and you wouldn't feel lonely either? Philosopher. I suppose the very concept of loneliness wouldn't even come up. You wouldn't need language, and there would be no use of logic or common sense either. But such a thing is impossible. Even if you lived on an uninhabited island, you would think about someone far across the ocean. Even if you spend your nights alone, you strain your ears to hear the sound of someone's breath. As long as there is someone out there somewhere, you will be haunted by loneliness. Youth. But then you could just rephrase that as if one could live in the universe all alone, one's problems would go away, couldn't you? Philosopher. In theory, yes. As Adler goes so far as to assert, all problems are interpersonal relationship problems. Youth. Can you say that again? Philosopher. We can repeat it as many times as you like. All problems are interpersonal relationship problems. This is a concept that runs to the very root of Adlerian psychology. If all interpersonal relationships were gone from this world, which is to say, if one were alone in the universe and all other people were gone, all manner of problems would disappear. Youth. That's a lie. It's nothing more than academic sophistry. Philosopher. Of course, we cannot do without interpersonal relationships. A human being's existence, in its very essence, assumes the existence of other human beings. Living completely separate from others is, in principle, impossible. As you are indicating, the premise, if one could live all alone in the universe, is unsound. Youth. That's not the issue I'm talking about. Sure, interpersonal relationships are probably a big problem. That much I acknowledge. But to say that everything comes down to interpersonal relationship problems now, that's really an extreme position. What about the worry of being cut off from the interpersonal relationships? The kind of problems that an individual agonizes over as an individual. Problems directed to oneself. Do you deny all that? Philosopher. There is no such thing as worry that is completely defined by the individual. So called internal worry does not exist. Whatever the worry that may arise, the shadows of other people are always present. Youth. But still, you're a philosopher. Human beings have loftier, greater problems than things like interpersonal relationships. What is happiness? What is freedom? And what is the meaning of life? Aren't these the things that philosophers have been investigating ever since the ancient Greeks? And you're saying, so what? Interpersonal relationships are everything? It seems kind of pedestrian to me. It's hard to believe that a philosopher would say such things. Philosopher. Well then, it seems there's need to explain things a bit more concretely. Youth. Yes, please do. If you're going to tell me that you're a philosopher, then you have got to really explain things, or else this makes no sense. Philosopher. You were so afraid of interpersonal relationships that you came to dislike me. You have avoided interpersonal relationships by disliking yourself. These assertions shook the youth to its very core. The words had an undeniable truth that seemed to pierce his heart. Even so, he had to find a clear rebuttal to the statement that all the problems that people experience are interpersonal problems. Adler was trivializing people's issues. The problems I'm suffering from aren't so mundane. Feelings of inferiority are subjective assumptions. Philosopher. Well, let's look at interpersonal relationships from a slightly different perspective. Are you familiar with the term feeling of inferiority? Youth. What a silly question. As you can surely tell from our discussion up to now, I'm just a huge blob of feelings of inferiority. Philosopher. What are those feelings specifically? Youth. Well, for instance, if I see something in the newspaper about a person around my age, someone who's really successful, I am always overcome with these feelings of inferiority. If someone else who's lived the same amount of time I have is so successful, then what on earth am I doing with myself? Or when I see a friend who seems happy, before I even feel like celebrating with them, I'm filled with envy and frustration. Of course, this pimple-covered face doesn't help matters, and I've got strong feelings of inferiority when it comes to my education and occupation. And then there is my income and social standing. I guess I'm just completely riddled with feelings of inferiority. Philosopher. I see. Incidentally, Adler is thought to be the first to use the term feeling of inferiority in the kind of context in which it is spoken of today. Youth. I didn't know that. Philosopher. In Adler's native German, the word is Minderwertigkeit. This is the word, man. It's a really long word. Which means a feeling of having less worth. So, feeling of inferiority is a term that has to do with one's value judgment of oneself. Youth. Value judgment? Philosopher. Is the feeling that one has no worth, or that one is only worth so much. Youth. That's a feeling I know well. That's me in a nutshell. Not a day goes by without me tormenting myself that there is no point in being alive. Philosopher. Well then, let's have a look at my own feelings of inferiority. When you first met me, what was your impression in terms of physical characteristics? Youth. Well, Philosopher. There is no need to hold back. Be direct. Youth. Alright, I guess you were smaller than I imagined. Philosopher. Thank you. I'm 155 centimeters tall. Adler was apparently around the same height. There was a time, until I was right around your age actually, when I was concerned about my height. I was sure that things would be different if I were of average height, 20 or even just 10 centimeters taller. As if a more enjoyable life were waiting for me. I talked to a friend about it when I was having those feelings, and he said it was a bunch of nonsense and simply dismissed it. Youth. That's horrible. Some friend. Philosopher. And then he said, what would you do if you got taller? You know, you have got a gift for getting people to relax. With a man who's big and strong, it's true, it does seem he can end up intimidating people just because of his size. With someone small like me, on the other hand, people let go of their wariness. So it made me realize that having a small build was a desirable thing both to me and to those around me. In other words, there was a transformation of values. I'm not worried about my height anymore. Youth. Okay, but that's Philosopher. Wait until I'm finished. The important thing here is that my height of 155 centimeters wasn't inferior. Youth. It wasn't inferior? Philosopher. It was not. In fact, lacking in or lesser than something. Sure, my 155 centimeters is less than the average height and an objectively measured number. At first glance, one might think it inferior, but the issue is really what sort of meaning I attribute to that height, what sort of value I give it. Youth. What does that mean? Philosopher. My feelings about my height were all subjective feelings of inferiority, which arose entirely through my comparing to myself to others. That is to say, in my interpersonal relationships. Because if there hadn't been anyone with whom to compare myself, I wouldn't have had any occasion to think I was short. Right now, you two are suffering from various feelings of inferiority, but please understand that what you're feeling is not an objective inferiority but a subjective feeling of inferiority. Even with an issue like height, it's all reduced to subjectivity. Youth. In other words, the feeling of inferiority we are suffering from are subjective interpretations rather than objective facts? Philosopher. Exactly. Seeing it from my friend's point of view, that I can get people to relax or that I don't intimidate them, such aspects can become strong points. Of course, this is a subjective interpretation. You could even say it's an arbitrary assumption. However, there is one good thing about subjectivity. It allows you to make your own choice. Precisely because I am leaving it to subjectivity, the choice to view my height as either an advantage or disadvantage is left open to me. Youth. The argument that you can choose a new lifestyle? Philosopher. That's right. We cannot alter objective facts, but subjective interpretations can be altered as much as one likes, and we are inhabitants of a subjective world. We talked about this at the very beginning, right? Youth. Yes, the well water that's 18 degrees. Philosopher. Now, remember the German word for a feeling of inferiority? As I mentioned a moment ago, feeling of inferiority is a term that has to do with one's value judgment of oneself. Then, what on earth could this value be? Okay, take diamonds for instance, which are traded at a high value, or currency. We find particular values for these things and say that 1 carat is this much and prices are such and such. But if you change your point of view, a diamond is nothing but a little stone. Youth. Well, intellectually it is. Philosopher. In other words, value is something that is based on a social context. The value given to a $1 bill is not an objectively attributed value, though that might be a common sense approach. If one considers its actual cost as printed material, the value is nowhere near $1. If I were the only person in this world and no one existed, I would probably be putting those $1 bills in my fireplace in winter time. Maybe I would be using them to blow my nose. Following exactly the same logic, there should have been no reason at all for me to worry about my height. Youth. If you were the only person in this world and no one else existed? Philosopher. Yes, the problem of value in the end brings us back to interpersonal relationships again. Youth. So this connects to what you were saying about all problems being interpersonal relationship problems. Philosopher. Yes, that's correct. An inferiority complex is an excuse. Youth. But can you say for sure that feelings of inferiority are really a problem of interpersonal relationships? Even the kind of person who is regarded socially as a success, who doesn't need to debase himself in relationships with other people, still has some feelings of inferiority. Even the businessman who amasses enormous wealth, the peerless beauty who is the envy of all, and the Olympic gold medalist, every one of them would be plagued by feelings of inferiority. Well, that's how it seems to me. How should I think about this? Philosopher. Adler recognizes that feelings of inferiority are something everyone has. There is nothing bad about feelings of inferiority themselves. Youth. So why do people have them in the first place? Philosopher. It's probably necessary to understand this in a certain order. First of all, people enter this world as helpless beings, and people have the universal desire to escape from this helpless state. Adler called this the pursuit of superiority. Youth, pursuit of superiority? Philosopher. This is something you could think of as simply hoping to improve or pursuing an ideal state. For instance, a toddler learns to study himself on both legs, to steady himself on both legs. He has the universal desire to learn language and to improve, and all the advancements of science throughout human history are due to this pursuit of superiority too. Youth. Okay, and then Philosopher. The counterpart of this is the feeling of inferiority. Everyone is in this condition of wanting to improve, and that is the pursuit of superiority. One holds up various ideals or goals and heads towards them. However, on not being able to reach one's ideals, one harbors a sense of being lesser. For instance, there are chefs who, the most inspired and accomplished they become, are forever beset from the sort of this feeling of inferiority, and that makes them say to themselves, I'm still not good enough, or I've got to bring my cooking to the next level, and that sort of thing. Youth. That's true. Philosopher. Adler is saying that the pursuit of superiority and the feeling of inferiority are not diseases, but stimulants to normal, healthy striving and growth. If it is not used in the wrong way, the feeling of inferiority too can promote striving and growth. Youth. The feeling of inferiority is a kind of launchpad? Philosopher. That's right. One tries to get rid of one's feelings of inferiority and keep moving forward. One's never satisfied with one's present situation, even if it is just a single step. One wants to make progress. One wants to be happier. There will be absolutely nothing wrong with the state of this kind of feeling of inferiority. There are, however, people who lose the courage to take a single step forward and who cannot accept the fact that the situation can be changed by making realistic efforts. People who, before even doing anything, simply give up and say things like, I'm not good enough anyway, or even if I tried, I wouldn't stand a chance. Youth. Well, that's true, there is no doubt about it. If the feeling of inferiority is strong, most people will become negative and say, I'm not good enough anyway, because that's what a feeling of inferiority is. Philosopher. No, that's not a feeling of inferiority. That's an inferiority complex. Youth. A complex? That's what the feeling of inferiority is, isn't it? Philosopher. Be careful. The word complex is used today in our country. It seems to have the same meaning as feeling of inferiority. You hear people saying, I've got a complex about my eyelids, or he's got a complex about his education, that sort of thing. This is an utter misuse of the term. At base, complex refers to an abnormal mental state made up of a complicated group of emotions and ideas and has nothing to do with the feeling of inferiority. For instance, there is Freud's Oedipus complex, which is used in the context of discussing the abnormal attraction of the child to the opposite sex parent. Youth. Yes, the nuances of abnormality are especially strong when it comes to the mother complex and the father complex. Philosopher. For the same reason, then, it's crucial to not mix up feeling of inferiority and inferiority complex and to think about them as clearly separate. Youth. Concretely, how are they different? Philosopher. There is nothing particularly wrong with the feeling of inferiority itself. You understand this point now, right? As Adler says, the feeling of inferiority can be a trigger for striving and growth. For instance, if one had a feeling of inferiority with regard to one's education and resolved to oneself, I am not well educated, so I'll just have to try harder than anyone else, that would be a desirable direction. The inferiority complex, on the other hand, refers to a condition of having begun to use one's feelings of inferiority as a kind of excuse. So, one thinks to oneself, I'm not well educated, so I can't succeed, or I'm not good looking, so I can't get married. When someone is insisting on the logic of A is the situation, so B cannot be done, in such a way in everyday life, that is not something that fits in the feeling of inferiority category. It is an inferiority complex. Youth. No, it's a legitimate casual relationship. If you're not well educated, it takes away your chances of getting work or making it in the world. You are regarded as low on the social scale and you can't succeed. That's not an excuse at all. It's just a cold hard fact, isn't it? Philosopher. No, you are wrong. Youth. How? Where am I wrong? Philosopher. What you are calling a casual relationship is something that Adler explains as apparent cause and effect. That is to say, you convince yourself that there is some serious causal that there is some serious causal relationship where there is none whatsoever. The other day, someone told me the reason I can't get married easily is that my parents got divorced when I was a child. From the viewpoint of Freudian etiology, the parents' divorce was a great trauma which connects in a clear causal relationship with one's views as marriage. Adler, however, with his stance of teleology, rejects such arguments as apparent cause and effect. Youth. But even so, the reality is having a good education makes it easier to be successful in society. I had thought you were wise to the ways of the world. Philosopher. The real issue is how one confronts that reality. If what you are thinking is, I'm not well educated so I can't succeed, then instead of I can't succeed, you should think, I don't want to succeed. Youth. I don't want to succeed? What kind of reasoning is that? Philosopher. It's simple, that it is scary to even take one step forward. Also, that you don't want to make realistic efforts. You don't want to change so much that you would be willing to sacrifice the pleasures you enjoy now. For instance, the time you spend playing and engaged in hobbies. In other words, you are not equipped with the courage to change your lifestyle. It is easier with things just as they are now, even if you have some complaints or limitations. I am tired. There are many sub chapters in this second night, main chapter 2. So I'll have to make a 3-part video of the main chapter 2, and this was the first sub part of main chapter 2. I'm gonna read the rest soon. You can wait for me. Bye.